Well, Casey Anthony's defense team getting ready to wrap up its case today, and the final witness is expected to take the stand when that trial resumes after lunch about an hour from now at 1:30. Dan Conaway is a former prosecutor. Jennifer Brandt is a trial attorney. They join me both now. And Dan, I guess the defense really fell short yesterday with witnesses and testimony backfiring on them, especially when George Anthony, Casey's dad, took the stand. Do you think they made it up today by bringing up how the Anthonys buried their family pets?
No. I think that the defense in this case really did some very fundamentally wrong things that you really learn in trial techniques 101, if you will. One of the first rules is that you don't call a hostile witness during your case in chief. And you can't accuse someone of molesting their own daughter and have them not be hostile. Secondly, all of these points brought up with George and Cindy should have been brought up during cross-examination during the state's case, where you can control the questioning. And that's, again, Trial Techniques 101. So I don't know what's going on here, but they're really violating fundamental rules about calling witnesses. And I do think that Casey's going to have to take the stand at this point.
And they would have had to have submitted that evidence, would they not have, before today, the evidence, or at least the testimony that they planned on bringing up about the pet's burial, Jennifer? I mean, when we heard about that, I myself was a bit surprised to be hearing about it, especially this late in the case.
Well, they do have to disclose certain things about what they will be bringing up, but I disagree with Dan. I think those points did help the defense today. Certainly, they had a better day than they did yesterday, and I think those points about the pets, it just creates additional chaos, additional confusion, and that's what the defense obviously is trying to do.
They want to raise doubt.
They do. And I think where they are missing the mark, though, the only thing that I really would need them to do next would be to prove those allegations that they brought up in their opening statement about the sexual abuse and about the drowning. I really don't think they've supported those points, and they need to do that before their case is over, and they are really running out of time.
And Dan,
so
that's
maybe Casey Anthony will be the next witness.
Dan, I mean, that is the biggest theory, which may have blown up in defense attorney Jose Baez's face, was him trying to show jurors a father who was capable of molesting and framing his daughter and his granddaughter's accidental death. Instead, he got a sobbing, one-time suicidal father on the stand yesterday. I want to play a quick clip of that. Listen.
I needed at that time to go and be with Kaylee.
And you expressed that in the note?
Yes, I did. Because I believe I failed her.
Were you prevented from accomplishing your goal by the intervention of law enforcement?
Yes, if it wouldn't been for law enforcement, I wouldn't be here today.
So basically, the defense handed the prosecution a suicide note, essentially. That's what they're talking about regarding that note. I mean, has Baez created a situation where either his client takes the stand or he has no case for final argument, Dan?
Well, yeah, the issue here, Julie, is that if he doesn't, he's got to put her on the stand because they've laid out this defense, and it's an affirmative defense of accidental drowning. And so the jury has to hear that from the judge. There's a thing called a jury charge, or jury instructions. So at the end of the case, before the jury deliberates, the judge has to be able to charge that they can consider accident as an alternative to murder and intentional killing of this child. And if there's no evidence of that presented during the case, then the judge doesn't even have to charge the jury that they can consider accident as a defense. And so the whole thing goes out the window, and quite frankly, the defense looks really stupid. So she's got to take the stand in order to at least have the jury be able to even consider it as a defense.
Or at the very least, look, if she gets convicted, her taking the stand today could potentially save her life if she were to be convicted and sentenced to death, because at this point the defense needs to raise sympathy for the family. And Jennifer, George's alleged mistress, Crystal Holloway, also one of the first people to take the stand today, also known as River Cruz, who claims that she had an affair with Casey's dad. Her testimony paints an incriminating picture here that George told her of an accident that apparently spun out of control. Let's listen to her now.
He was sitting on my couch, and I was sitting on the floor, and he had told me, he had said it was an accident that snowballed out of control, but I was in shock, and by the time I looked up, his eyes were filled with tears, and I didn't elaborate. I didn't ask him anything further.
Jennifer, is she credible?
Well, I think she's testifying. I don't know how credible she is. I mean, she did sell her story to the National Enquirer. She made money off of that. I mean, I think the prosecution was able to point that out. So, you know, you have to wonder. She said that she felt that that was the most reliable source for her to tell her story and that they would tell her full story. But most of us know that, you know, the tabloids usually sensationalize stories. So, you know, you have to question whether that really makes her sound very credible. But the accident issue, I mean, that's something she is bringing up, the idea that, you know, George told her that there was an accident, and it could possibly raise a question in the jury's mind, you know, whether or not that could be correct. So I think that's the only place I've seen where the defense is really trying to show and support the statements that they made in their opening statement about an accident, about a tragic accident.
But Dan, then again, you know, the defense comes up with the whole suicide thing. The suicide note says nothing about how he knew where Kaylee was, so that again is sort of a backfire.
Yeah, and they really opened the door because they brought up the suicide, and by doing that, and also by putting George on their case during their defense, they opened the door, it's called in the law, and basically they allowed the prosecution to then charge through that door and to talk about the suicide note. And so, again, I just see mistakes by the defense. I will say this, though. Last night I was reading online about the case, and I was looking at a lot of the blogs, and there is a lot of debate in the court of public opinion, at least, about whether or not the state has proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. So we don't know what's going to happen, provided that Casey does take the stand, and it would make sense that she does. We shall see what happens, but there's definitely people on both sides on this issue.
All right, thank you both, Dan Conaway, Jennifer Brandt, for talking to us. And just as a reminder, the Casey Anthony murder trial will come back from recess in about 1 hour, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so keep it right here on Fox. We're, of course, watching every single minute unfold. John?